Welcome to this episode of the Astrology of Family Karma and Relationships podcast. I'm your host, Alexander Mallon, and our wonderful co-host with us,
Sheila G., the guide on the side.
Today's discussion, Sheila, will be really, in essence, about relationship astrology, looking at two people's charts and how they relate, how they connect. In astrology speak, we call it synastry. We refer to it as synastry, that synastric or that blend, that synthesis of one person's chart to another. And we're looking at the charts, folks, of Donald Trump and JD Vance.
Mm-hmm. And we invite you to follow our podcast on Apple and Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel to help us grow.
So I want to remind our listeners and viewers that astrology is literally connected. It is a view, rather, of astronomy. It's an astronomical view, your chart, of the moment you're born into nature. And so I have this graph of fire, earth, air, water that describe that element, those elements of nature and how we move through the seasons.
Yes.
When we look at the charts of JD Vance and Donald Trump, we see a few things that leap off the page, which I'll be bringing their charts up here to really dig into it. But for me, Sheila, one of the key things that really leapt off the page was, amazingly, a sun-moon relationship. The sun, the ego; the moon, the follower, the feeler; the sun, the light of consciousness, light of day, the season, the season you're born under; and the moon, the reflected light of the sun. Astrologically, Sheila, the sun is considered ego, the moon is considered id, or plexus, or gut, emotional body.
The unconscious?
The unconscious mind. That's right. Mm-hmm. So we could sort of say conscious mind and unconscious mind. And in each person's chart, we want to, for the individual, look at the sun-moon phase, the sun-moon relationship that you have when you're born. Were you born during a first quarter moon? Were you born during a last quarter moon? Were you born during a full moon where they're opposite, and there's either opposition between one's emotion and one's ego, or there's maybe perspective, like a full moon. There's sort of a balancing act. So between these two charts, JD Vance and Donald Trump, we have synastrically, the synastry, that these sun-moon relationships are in a trine relationship, one leg of a triangle, one leg of an equilateral triangle, a aspect in astrology that talks about flow, sort of like emotional, egoic flow, that chart to chart, there's a sun-moon trine aspect in each person's chart. We'll show you in a second. It says that the egos of these gentlemen and the other person's emotional body feeling kind of flow easily and nicely with each other.
Oh, wonderful.
That sounds good for them.
Yes.
The question remains here as we go a little further digging. Are these complementary souls? Are these complementary colors? Do they run in a similar way all together, or are there areas where they're not necessarily on the same page?
Well, this preview that you're giving us about looking at the charts, maybe that's one reason why Vance changed his mind, because he was a hater, a Trump hater. He was not very complimentary of Trump in his before he got involved in this race.
Yeah, this race now has been shifting gears pretty quickly, week by week. We're now in the middle portion of the month of July 2024. And of course, we are seeing JD Vance as a new candidate, speaking as a keynote speaker at the RNC. And we're seeing simultaneously Joe Biden struggling a great deal with keeping his bid for presidency here. But indeed, JD Vance, Sheila, while they're having this connection, he wasn't speaking well of Trump a number of years ago. JD Vance has only had a rather brief political career, maybe a couple of years. And when Vance was, out there really trying to get himself connected, he said he's a never Trumper. He said, I'm a never Trumper. He also equated Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler. So yeah, as you said,
Yeah,
not exactly the most flattering statements that Vance made of Trump.
I know. So let's see why all of a sudden they're starting this bromance.
So let's do the astrology of it. Let's look at some astrological connections. Here's Donald Trump, June 14th of 1946. I used the 10:54 a.m. chart in Queens, New York. JD Vance, the time of birth for JD was just released recently, and I believe the source was that someone had contacted City Hall or Department of Records in Ohio. JD Vance, August 2nd, 1984, 8:11 in the morning, Middletown, Ohio. One of the things that really leapt off the page also, besides that sun and air sign, Gemini for Trump, moon and air sign, Libra for Vance, sun and fire sign, Leo for Vance, moon in fire sign, Sag for Trump, which I'll show in another chart graph in a second. Besides that leaping off the page, that sun-moon relationship, what also right off the bat leaps off the page here, Sheila, is
Yeah.
that both these guys have Leo rising. In fact, Donald Trump, the
Wow.
very last degree of Leo, 29 degrees of Leo, and JD Vance, 27 degrees of Leo. They both are late Leos. And there's another interesting thing. When Vance was born, just having crossed that eastern horizon line, the ascendant of a birth chart for Vance, 27 Leo ascendant, was the planet Venus. Venus is 23 degrees of Leo. Vance's ascendant is 27. They're off by 4 degrees. So 16 minutes before JD Vance was born, that Venus had just risen over that eastern horizon. Donald Trump has 29 Leo rising and 26 Leo Mars.
Wow.
3 degrees off. So it says 9 minutes before Trump's birth, Mars had just risen on that angle. In Astro 101, to have Mars or any planet, I should say, right on the angle, whether it's the top of the chart culminating at that noon hour placement, or at the bottom of the chart where Vance has his Mars at the midnight point, rising or setting, any of those 4 major angles of a chart, when a planet is on those angles, it's particularly potent and intense in the person's consciousness, their life. It's like saying there's something happening when that person was born, the nature of that planet describes. Literally say when JD was born, sun daddy in a birth chart, moon mommy, sun daddy. Well, JD has a sun Venus conjunction. That's saying dad's in love with this baby. We have a sun Venus rising in JD Vance's chart. It says new dawn, new day, new baby when JD Vance was born in 1984. So that right there tells an astrologer that JD Vance's daddy was really excited to have a baby and to have a son. That's like quality of like my son. So Venus rising, dad's in love with having a baby son. Mars rising, conjunct Pluto in Donald Trump's chart tells the exact opposite story. That normally says when this baby comes, there may even be Mars rising, like a cesarean section or something. I have got to go back in Trump's history and see, was there any complications, maybe a C-section or something else happening when Trump was born. But there is definitely indication here of turbulence when Donald Trump was born. Mars and Pluto. Mars is about cutting and war and aggression and frustration. And Pluto, well, that's about life and death change. That with Pluto being in between that Mars and that Venus in Donald Trump's chart. So having that Mars Pluto rising together and Pluto near Venus, Pluto near Mars for Donald Trump, that says that dad is feeling very, very stressed about having a child at this time. This child, in essence, is not well responded to by dad. There's misgivings here. So each of them have a very different template for the relationship with men and with father figures. And this is really significant because essentially 46 for Trump and 1984 for Vance, JD could be Trump's son. He's old enough and young enough, rather, to be Trump's son. So when we compare the charts, in astrology, we typically will wrap one person's chart around the other. Here we have Donald Trump's chart in the inner wheel with that Sun in Gemini at the top of the sky in that career sector. Donald Trump is definitely a person who wants to be seen in the outer world. And with Regulus rising in Donald Trump's chart, the sign of the royal star of Leo, the star of the monarch of the king, one of the 4 royal stars of Egypt, Donald Trump is monarch. And with Mars rising in Donald's chart, he is king, leader, monarch. Well, that's a bit of an interesting dilemma, because JD has that Sun Leo, Leo rising, Venus Leo. He wants to be the beloved king, is JD. So we have the beloved king and we have the Mars rising, more militaristic king, rules by martial law versus ruling by love and being beloved. Those 2 pieces will clash eventually. Some astrologers are looking at that, particularly that Sun, JD Vance's Sun in Leo exactly on the Pluto of Trump. There's an exact, by degree, 10-degree Leo Sun, 10-degree Leo Pluto in Trump's chart, an exact conjunction. Pluto rules plutocrats. Pluto's discovery in the 1930s was a time when there was an abundance of plutocrats, Mussolini and Hitler, etc. So Trump's Pluto falls right on Vance's Sun. But they do positively, Sheila, have this Venus in Leo, Mars in Leo contact between their charts. Vance's Leo, Venus and Leo rather, Trump's Mars in Leo, they're conjunct. Between the Sun-Moon relationships I talked about and this Venus-Mars conjunction between the 2 charts, this is the kind of stuff you want to see in a marriage. When you have like a passionate, hot, sexual marriage, you want to see, with passion and hot sexuality, Venus and Mars together between 2 charts. And that's what these 2 gentlemen have. So what's the nature of their connection? Well, certainly it's passionate. It certainly is powerfully passionate. That's a very big piece of what they've got between them.
Is that passionate about just being, running the country together, or is that what you're mainly meaning?
Well, I mean
leading to this
of passion between each other. They're passionately intense. So when you used the word earlier, Sheila, bromance. When the bromance is happening, it's big time happening. It's a big time thing. So that part is fantastic. It says they can really come together in a super, super powerful way.
Yeah, obviously Vance was able to get over his hatred or disdain for Trump.
Yeah. However, while there is this, super duper sun to moon between the charts, and this Venus Mars deep conjunction between them, they're really excited about each other, maybe overly excited. While they have that, Donald has that Mars rising, Vance has that Mars at the bottom of his chart, and those 2 Mars positions are exactly square. A square in a chart, Sheila, is like a ceiling to a wall, internal tension. The ceiling and the wall, there's an internal square, 90 degrees, internal struggle. It's not an opposition. It's not about finding a balance. It's internal irritation. What I think will happen over time when this bromance fades is that you will find irritation between Vance and Trump. And the key factor over time that will eventually come to pass is this theme of who's the Indian and who's the chief, who's the leader and who's the follower. We know right off the bat the arrangement is King Donald Trump and the lesser JD Vance, his follower. That's how it should be arranged, but that is not how JD Vance double Leo is going to operate. This is a situation where Vance wants Trump to promote him, support him, groove him, make him groomed, rather, I meant to say, groom him to be the next president. He's a vice president after all, and clearly 1946, Donald is getting older. He's not going to have another term. So Vance is his successor. Vance is like his son. However,
well, you don't know if he'll have another term. Remember, he wants to be dictator or king forever. But
Does.
yes, but age does tend to catch up with you, like we're seeing with the struggle with Biden.
Yeah, well, we have to ask ourselves, what is the relationship that these two men have towards other men in general? And I've already said in earlier discussion here that this chart of Vance and Trump shows that Donald does not love men, he sees men as competition. Donald's father saw Donald's birth as competition. Donald had to measure up to his father, but never could. That dynamic of Donald's father to Donald is going to be the parental dynamic that we see between these two men. That's the way this is going to go. That's the interrelationship of these two gentlemen. So I suspect we're going to see this to be a powerful, joined at the hip, mini-me kind of a dynamic between Trump and his son, his younger Vance. But over time, the son will overshadow the
Well, we'll
father.
see. They have to win first if they end up being vice president. But we'll see how
That's
their
how it's going to
relationship
wind.
progresses as they go along with this campaign.
We'll see what happens here, but it looks very powerful between these two men.
Okay, well.
Well, thank you, listeners and viewers, for joining us for another program. We look forward to seeing you again. Till next time, may the stars be with you.
Indeed.